Welcome back for another episode of the Silver and Blue Podcast. It is a Victory Tuesday, not Victory Monday, Victory Tuesday edition of the show. I'm joined by my co-host, Corey Douglas, following a big-time Monday night win over the New York Giants. The Cowboys are 2-1. Corey, how are you feeling?
Yeah, we're feeling really good after last night's performance. I think the game kind of went similar to kind of how we talked about last week leading into the game. And it's just good to see the Cowboys get a road win and, against a division opponent. So, yeah, I'm doing good today.
Yeah, there's a saying where, you say we do not apologize for wins in the NFL because any given Sunday, anything can happen. Well, what we really don't apologize for is a road win against a divisional opponent with a backup quarterback. We do not apologize for those. And the Cowboys came away with a really big win last night. Just really impressive across the board. Honestly, both sides of the ball were sharp, especially in the second half. Um, you have to start with the defense. But before we get into that, I do want, we talked about in the pregame show that we did last week, previewing this game, we talked about how important this game was from a standpoint of if you're able to win this game, that sets you up incredibly well for the next, the next week or two before Dak gets back, because now you're 2-1. You have Washington coming in next week, who looks to be one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, we'll have plenty of time to talk about Washington. I'm not going to get into them, but point is, this Sunday against Washington is a very winnable game, and you have a very real chance at being 3-1 after Dak played one game. And so, I know the stupid Cooper Rush noise is gonna get loud if they keep winning, and I'm not even gonna bother addressing that. I like we it's just we're not gonna spend time on it, but Cooper Rush was really solid again last night, and he guided this team to a very important win. And we said again, we've talked time and time again, if Cooper Rush could win them a couple games, maybe 3 games while Dak's out, you'd still be in the mix. Well, they're 2-0 with Cooper Rush, and now they have a real chance at pushing at staying in the playoff mix until Dak can get back.
Yeah, like you said, like we both talked about last week, this game was very important just because, anytime you play a division opponent, the Cowboys through the last few years have historically been really good against the NFC East opponents. So to continue that, yeah, exactly. Against, with Cooper Rush out there doing his thing, it's just really important. I thought we saw some very, very, very encouraging signs, especially on the defensive and offensive lines. I thought both of those groups played extremely well last night. We're going to get into a lot of that on this episode. But yeah, I mean, getting 2-0 with Cooper Rush, now you get a very winnable home game against Washington to get to 3-1, hopefully. I mean, it's definitely we're heading in the right direction after week 1, where a lot of people, including myself, and I think maybe you as well, thought the season is going down the drain quick. But now we're sitting here at 2-1. The Eagles are 3-0, but we'll deal with them, kind of when we see them first matchups in a couple of weeks. But we're right there in the mix.
Yeah. I mean, they are right there, and after week 1, 2-1 seemed like a far-fetched scenario that was borderline impossible, and here we are. So let's get into the defense. And I don't think you can have a conversation about the defense last night without starting with that defensive front. They registered 35 pressures on Daniel Jones. I don't know what PFF's history is, how far they go back, but I got to imagine 35 is up there in terms of just most pressures registered in one game, because that was ridiculous. 35 pressures. I'm looking at the PFF box score right now. 3 from Chauncey Golson, 7 from DeMarcus Lawrence, who also had 3 sacks, 2 from Odigizua, 6 from Parsons, 1 from Dante Fowler, 2 from Gallimore, 4 from Dorrance Armstrong, 3 from Donovan Wilson, 1 from Quentin Bohanna, 2 from Sam Williams, 1 from Van Der Esch, and 3 from Anthony Barr. I mean, they were getting after Daniel Jones. And you talk about, you could go a lot of directions with, some of those names I just rattled off, but I think you have to start with DeMarcus Lawrence. He'd been solid to start the year, but he'd registered a couple pressures, but you're kind of like, all right, Hey, D-Law, it's kind of time. You're really good against the run, but let's see a little something against the pass. And my God, did he abuse poor Evan Neal out there? Man, that was the most dominant D-Law performance in a year or two at least. I mean, he had his way early and often and just lived in the backfield. 3 sacks in a game. And there was a little controversy before the season. He was saying he was going to try and take back that sack crown from Micah. And he was down 4-0 heading into this week. And now it's 4-3 following week 3. So what a night from D-Law.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely turned back the clock to when, we kind of all fell in love with D-Law because, he was getting those sacks and those accounting numbers and different things of that nature. And it was funny to me that he was doing it mostly against Evan Neal because Evan Neal was in the media with a quote last week talking about going up against Parsons. And he kind of downplayed the matchup and said, he puts on his pants one leg at a time, just like I do, but I'm excited to play him. And then D-Law just absolutely went out there and cooked him because, Micah Parsons, he had a quiet game based off Micah Parsons standards that he set so far this season and so far in his career. But to have just the relentless pressure of D-Law and, Dorrance Armstrong and just different guys along that line, it was incredible to see, especially when you talk about in terms of D-Law and, just not having seen that performance in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned, a relatively quiet performance from Micah Parsons. Parsons still did register 6 pressures, and among those 6 pressures, 2 of them were a hit and 4 were a hurry. So,
Yeah,
Micah still had a pretty profound impact on the game.
absolutely.
They played a lot of they played a lot of stacking Micah and D-Law on the same side, which I thought was really interesting. In a minute, I'm going to pull up Micah's snap counts by position because I always find it interesting how Dan Quinn deploys Parsons. But
it looked like he had played a lot of linebacker early for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to depend on the matchups each week. Maybe a more mobile quarterback, he's going to play a little bit more linebacker. Not necessarily to just spy him, but it's something to think about when the Cowboys play Jalen Hurts and the Eagles in a couple weeks. But he seemed like he played a little bit more linebacker. I believe Parsons had 37 pass rush snaps out of his 60 overall plays. So he played a little more linebacker last night. But again, like you said, quieter night for Parsons, but even a quieter night for Parsons meant highlight plays left and right. I mean that pressure he registered early in the game where he bowled over the Giants right guard and then right through the running back that was there. I believe it was Saquon, and then I forget the right guard's name, and then just right into Daniel Jones. I mean, then you had that other one where he just ran through Matt Breida in the backfield, pressuring Daniel Jones. I mean, he clearly wasn't 100%, and we heard that he wasn't, but that was still a pretty solid performance from Micah Parsons. And yeah, I mean, he is what he is. He's arguably the best defensive player in the league, and I gotta imagine his presence is making D-Law's life a little easier too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you hear these pass rushers speak, having a dog on the other side of them definitely opens things up, and then it turns into a competition like it has with D-Law and Micah Parsons about, all right, who's going to get the most sacks, and all right, I'll meet you at the quarterback type conversation. So it definitely creates competition from within, and then obviously when you have that competition from within, it helps the team in the long run, and it helps the team win games, and which is what majority of guys are all about.
Absolutely. So I'm looking at Parsons' snap counts by position on PFF last night. Played 40 on the D line, 20 in the box, and that's almost right. And again, I think this might be a matchup thing. I don't know, but it fascinates me how Dan Quinn deploys him because week 1 against Tampa Bay, 40 snaps on the D line, 21 in the box as a linebacker. Then week 2 against Cincinnati, 55 on the D line, only 3 at linebacker, and then this week again, 40 at D line, 20 on the box. On the D line, he had 25 snaps at left outside linebacker, 15 at right outside. And then on the box, he just kind of played all over the place and as an off the ball linebacker. He did register 1 snap as a wide corner against Tampa Bay, but I
actually saw just to kind of
close eye on that for sure, like how Dan Quinn deploys him throughout the season.
Yeah, and I actually heard an interesting stat kind of where Micah Parsons lines up that DeMarcus Lawrence and I believe it was Dorrance Armstrong actually had more snaps and coverage than Micah Parsons heading into last night. So I mean, that just goes to show how much he's rushing the passer and how versatile he is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm still of the of the mind that I don't think Parsons should be a 100% of the time pass rusher. I think he should just be used as a defensive weapon depending on the matchup each week and just used where Dan Quinn thinks he's going to create the most impact. So, yeah, and also shout out to Dorrance Armstrong who had 4 pressures last night, I believe, and I believe he had 1, maybe 2 sacks. Dorrance Armstrong has been really good. Now, granted, the whole Randy Gregory thing is its own conversation, but Dorrance Armstrong has mitigated the loss of Randy Gregory at some point. I'm not going to get into how damn good Randy Gregory has been in Denver so far because he has been tearing it up in Denver. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't occasionally think about how nasty this pass rush would be with Gregory, Parsons, and Lawrence. But Dorrance Armstrong has come on really strong lately. And he was a really young prospect coming out of college, and he's going to take some time to develop. And he seems to be turning a corner because he sort of started to turn a corner last year. And he's making an impact early on. So Dorrance Armstrong also
and he blocked a field goal last night.
Yeah, and he blocked a field goal. I forgot about that. Yeah, he blocked a field goal too. And credit to the special teams. Special teams was solid again last night. Brett Maher, he missed a field goal, but it was a 59-yarder. I'm not going to kill Brett Maher for missing a 59-yarder. But
and
yeah,
Maher
has been solid. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Turpin finally broke loose a little bit. He had a really nice kickoff return out to like the 35, maybe the 40, and then that punt return that honestly was
should have been a touchdown.
It should have been 6. He got tripped up by the punter. He had one man to beat, and I think Aikman said on the broadcast, he's like, if you ran that same sequence back 100 times, I'm not sure the punter is able to tackle him again because it was. I think he kind of caught his leg barely when he dove at his leg. But yeah, we finally got to see a little bit of Turpin's impact. We saw some of that last week, but Turpin's really close to breaking one, man. He's really close. But yeah, special teams was good last night. But back to the defense. Trayvon Diggs came up with an interception, which I don't know how he caught it. It was when I first saw the replay, I was like, oh, it bounced off the ground. But then you look closer, it's like, oh, it bounced off his hand into his chest. And the secondary was strong. Had some screw ups at times. I thought I wasn't as impressed with the rest of the defense as I was with the defensive line. There was the occasional busted coverage. I thought there was a lot of missed tackles in the secondary. Donovan Wilson, I believe, looking at PFF's box score, he missed 4 tackles. A lot of the guys in the secondary didn't receive great PFF grades, and I know that's not everything, but it does kind of check out with the eyeball test of watching the game where the secondary wasn't terrific. But it didn't matter because the D-line had Daniel Jones running for his life all night, 35 pressures. I cannot get over that. But yeah, the secondary was all right. And, there was just too many missed tackles, especially on the big Saquon touchdown run.
Yeah, I thought definitely, Trayvon Diggs, I'm glad he got that one to kind of to clinch the game because he dropped or had an opportunity to get.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
And one of them definitely was going to be a pick 6 easily. I don't know how he didn't catch that one. It went right through his hands, and then Sterling Shepard actually ended up catching that pass, which was kind of crazy. But I thought overall, like you said, the tackling was definitely an issue. I thought they got too many unnecessary penalties. You mentioned Donovan Wilson with the missed tackles, but he also had a very stupid penalty. Whether you can argue whether or not the ref should have thrown the flag on the play, but it's just doing stupid, unnecessary stuff that just didn't need to be done in that situation. You talk about not even just the secondary, but Sam Williams had a penalty that was offset by the Giants committing a penalty on the same play, which was absolutely ridiculous. And then just in terms of the secondary, not their best night overall. And then again, this isn't really a team that has a whole lot of weapons on the outside. So I don't know if the secondary kind of took their foot off the gas kind of thing or kind of what that was about. But luckily it didn't result in, a worse result than it did.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but yeah, there's a lot of really stupid penalties. And they got, officially they're flagged 8 times for 70 yards, and there was some that were waved off, and it could have been more.
It's just the timing of them too.
Yeah, they were really poorly timed, and the refs were not good at all, both ways. That was not a well officiated game at all. But yeah, Anthony Barr struggled a little last night. I believe he had a holding penalty earlier in the game on when he was out in coverage on Saquon. But yeah, it was not the best night from the secondary and the defensive line. Was there anybody that stuck out to you in terms of positively in the secondary?
I would say Trayvon Diggs. I mean, obviously it's the obvious name, but I thought he played really well. Like I said, he had a couple opportunities for interceptions that I think maybe 8 times out of 10 he comes down with at least one of those 2 opportunities earlier in the game. Jordan Lewis had the one flag. Anthony Brown was decent. I thought Malik Hooker he had a couple nice hits in coverage out there. But Trayvon Diggs has to lead the way. I think he's been so much better in coverage so far this year, which is definitely a step that I wanted to see him take, and kind of being a little less, taking a little less chances, than he does. It's not going to always result in interceptions, but like I said, he had opportunities to come away at least with a couple more last night. But I just love what I'm seeing from him, just being just real sticky in coverage and not allowing those kind of big plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the PFF box score as well, in terms of coverage grades, Malik Hooker was their highest graded player in coverage. And that kind of checks out. Malik Hooker's been terrific throughout this season so far.
Absolutely.
The further he gets away from his Achilles injury, the better he's gotten. So Malik Hooker has been a really big positive. And then looking at targets and receptions, Anthony Brown was the second highest graded DB, targeted 11 times, 6 catches for 48 yards. Anthony Brown was solid. I thought Jordan Lewis had kind of a tough night. He was the lowest graded Cowboy in coverage, 7 targets, 7 receptions, 68 yards. Mukwamu was targeted one time for 6 yards. Van Der Esch was targeted twice for 16 yards. And then Trayvon Diggs, the buzzword of how many yards did he give up, and everyone that hates on him brings it up. Trayvon Diggs targeted 6 times for 3 receptions, 52 yards, and a pick. You take that all day long. Kelvin Joseph in 4 snaps. Kelvin Joseph played a little bit when Diggs went down, but yeah, they were okay. Not the best night in the secondary, and I think Jordan Lewis is off to a little bit of a tough start to the season, but he's shown that he's a good player, and I'm not terribly worried about him yet. But do you have any other thoughts about the defense before we move on to the offense?
No, I'm good. We can move on to the offense.
Yeah, so let's start with none other than the man of the hour, Cooper Rush, who he was the highest graded offensive player for Dallas last night. He was rock solid, came in with an 82.1 grade, and I'm hard to complain about that. And by the way, the highest graded player on defense was Chauncey Golson with a grade of a 94 in 11 snaps. So he didn't have a lot of snaps, but he was an impact player as well. He deserves a mention. But back to Cooper Rush. One thing that I noticed, and it checks out with the PFF box scores and the premium stats, is play action. Cooper Rush was terrific on play action, and his stats should have looked even better if CeeDee Lamb had caught that. Would have been like a 60-yard touchdown. I forget where the ball was, but I'm looking at Cooper Rush's box score, and he had 15 attempts on play action, completed 11 of them for 73% for 158 yards, and he received a 91 grade on play action. No play action, he received a 63 grade. He was 10 of 16 for 57 yards. So Cooper Rush's yards per attempt on play action last night, 10.5, no play action, 3.6. So Cooper Rush, he did what you need him to do. He did what you need a backup quarterback to do. I'm not going to entertain these is he better than Dak conversations because those are dumb. But he did what you need a backup quarterback to do. He needed to manage the game, make no mistakes, and I believe he had no turnover-worthy plays last night per the grades. That's what you want a backup quarterback to do. And I also thought Kellen Moore called a terrific game last night too. I mean, some of the play calls, that the throw to Hendershot, I believe on the go-ahead drive, it may have been the tying drive, I forget, but the throw to Hendershot up the right side was a great scheme, and it was a great way to make Wink Martindale pay for his blitz-heavy scheme. But yeah, Cooper Rush, hats off to him, man. And I believe it was on the first play of that of the drive to tie the game that throw he made with pressure in his face to up the left side. It was either to CD Lamb or Noah Brown, where he dropped it in perfectly, and it got an audible reaction out of Troy too. He made some really big throws last night, and he did exactly what you need a backup quarterback to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said this last week, but the way his decision making, the way he just lets it rip. I know Mike McCarthy, his biggest thing is about ball distribution. I think his ball distribution has been phenomenal. You saw him as soon as the first play of the game, got the ball to CD Lamb, kind of got him going, even though he did have a drop, an egregious drop later in the game that, you kind of touched on there. But Cooper Rush, I mean, I have no complaints about him, just the way he's just playing the game. I mean, and I thought he wasn't getting helped out by his receivers, especially early on in the game. I think right after CD Lamb had the drop, they came to Jalen Tolbert, and I think he short-armed a deep ball that would have been a big play as well. But Cooper Rush, I mean, he's decisive. He's really decisive with
confident. He seems confident.
Yeah, he's confident. And like you said, Kellen Moore, they called it up for him last night. And like I said, I have no complaints about Cooper Rush. And, he's doing definitely what we needed to, or what the Cowboys needed in this situation without Dak Prescott. And now you can kind of be patient with Dak, not rush him back. If you don't want him to play against Philadelphia, even in a couple of weeks, he's bought you enough time at this point. If, assuming you get this win against Washington, and then, we'll see what happens with the Rams and Philly. But yeah, he's buying you time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to that play action, they ran play action on 48% of his dropbacks, which I'm at some point I'm going to have to go back and look at what those numbers look like for Dak's recent starts, but they need to mix some of this in with Dak too, because Dak is very good off play action too.
So I heard something today, and this is coming from Brian Broaddus. I don't know if he threw this out there because this is something that he heard, or if this is something that he was just throwing out there as to maybe why they don't do this more. But he brought up the point that the plays under center with Dak Prescott and Cooper Rush, it is significantly more with Cooper Rush than it is with Dak. And his thought process, like I said, I don't know if this is something that he was told or if this is just something that, being a former scout in the NFL kind of leads him to believe. But he was saying that like I said, I don't want to put words in his mouth. I'm kind of word this very carefully. But he said that there might be something to the Cowboys not wanting Dak Prescott to turn his back to the defense and having to get turned around and locate where everybody is on the field. Now, again, this is something that he just threw out there in passing. I'm not sure if he was told this or not. I want to reiterate that. But I think that might be something, to kind of monitor once he gets back to see if they continue doing that, because obviously the offense is a lot better when you are using that play action and quarterbacks benefit from that. So, like I said, it's just something to monitor going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on how much the play calling changes when Dak gets back here in a couple weeks. But yeah, let's talk about the pass catchers too. They weren't helping Rush out early on, like you mentioned, the Tolbert short arm, but CeeDee Lamb, that drop, it was awful. It was terrible. Everyone was dragging him on Twitter for it. It got ugly on Twitter for, a hot minute. But on that go-ahead drive, he absolutely took over that drive. And he finished with 8 catches on 12 targets for 87 yards and a touchdown. Hats off to CeeDee Lamb because he really needed a bounce back. And hats off to Noah Brown, 5 catches for 54 yards. He's been consistent over the last couple of weeks. But CeeDee Lamb, I think of all the flashiness and everything, I thought, arguably his best play of the night. Everyone's talking about the one-handed touchdown catch, but I mean, that 4th and 4 from like the 40-yard line. I mean, that was a difficult catch because he knew he needed to get to the sticks and he was going to get lit up. And he did get lit. They lit him up and he still held on to the ball. So hats off to CeeDee Lamb, man. He really, people have been hating on him a little bit. And, especially after that drop, and he woke up for sure. But yeah, the pass catchers were solid last night. Hendershot finished with 3 catches for 43 yards. Noah Brown, 5 for 54, as I mentioned. Jalen Tolbert had a catch. Simi Fehoko made a nice catch. Jake Ferguson had a couple catches. I thought they did a good job of mixing in Hendershot and Ferguson, mitigating the loss of Dalton Schultz. So I'm Jake Ferguson got my attention, especially with his blocking. But yeah, I thought the tight ends were solid in place of Schultz, and I thought I was a little surprised Gallup didn't play, but based on those warm up videos, I'm kind of glad he didn't because he doesn't seem to be ready, and I want them to take their time with Gallup. But I was pretty encouraged by the pass catchers, especially as the game wore on, and especially CeeDee Lamb because he had that awful drop, but he made up for it, and he absolutely took over that drive like an alpha wide receiver does.
Yeah, I think part of the CD Lamb conversation, and I think I'm kind of guilty of this as well, is because when you look at a guy like Justin Jefferson, although he's been quiet the last couple of weeks, he hasn't taken that leap to being a number one receiver in Lamb's case yet. So I think some of that is factoring into the conversation when you talk about Lamb. And of course, you have those drops like that where, they're not all that bad, but, he will drop a ball on you in certain situations. But like I said, I thought, like you said, I thought his return, his ability to kind of brush it off. And I know there was, I think Bobby Belt had said that DeMarcus Lawrence and Trayvon Diggs had to kind of go over to him on the sideline and like, hey, there's a lot of game left. Keep your head in there. And, that's what he did. And, that's going to be important as far as just being able to mentally recover for something like that. Because, I think a lot of people also made a big deal out of kind of the smile, laugh, or whatever you want to call that after that drop, which I'm not making too big of a deal of that just because that's a situation where, sometimes if you're having a rough day, all you can do is laugh. And he knows, he was saying, my bad, my bad. And, he obviously cares about the game a lot. And I think that was getting a little overblown. But again, finishing the game with 8 catches was huge. And like you said, on the game or the drive where they took the lead in the game, was very, 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 very impressive from him. And then obviously it was capped off with the one-hand touchdown in the end zone. So all in all, it was a solid performance, not only from CeeDee Lamb, but Noah Brown, like you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, I think this receiving core, while it's not the most talented, I think they're kind of starting to kind of find their legs a little bit, at least in Lamb and Noah Brown's case. I think we can have this conversation about Jalen Tolbert on a different day because I'm just not liking what I'm seeing from him. Going back to training camp, and obviously he was inactive for the first 2 games, and then last night being his first regular season action. But I'm not. I think he needs to improve a lot.
Yeah, I mean he's a rookie, and it's going to take time with him. I'm not too worried about Jalen Tolbert yet. Emphasis on yet, but yeah. So solid night from the receivers, pass catchers. I thought they did what they needed to do. CeeDee Lamb drop aside, they were rock solid. I thought Hendershot showed some really nice yards after catch ability. Ferguson
Hurdle
was great.
game.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching that play. I was like, hold on to the ball, dude. Like he was getting a little too aggressive.
Exactly.
And then you did have that big rookie moment with Jake Ferguson where he didn't get out of bounds. He ran out of bounds with
Oh yeah, he went out of bounds. Yeah.
right before the Giants got the ball back, and you could tell he knew he screwed up, and that was a pretty big screw up that cannot happen. But thankfully, the defense was able to get a stop. But let's get into the. Also, before we move on, I did have to mention Simi Fehoko made a really nice catch at the end of the first half to get Dallas into field goal range. Maher missed the field goal a little bit left, but that was a really nice route and catch from Fehoko. I'm hoping he's able to exactly, and I'm hoping he's able to keep improving. But yeah, the more depth at receiver, the better at this point. And it honestly it buys Michael Gallup more time, and I guess even James Washington too, whenever he gets back here in the next couple of weeks. So the cavalry's coming for the passing attack. Dak's coming back soon. Gallup should be back soon. James Washington, and then again, maybe they bring in another receiver. I doubt it at this point, but let's look at the running game and the offensive line because I'll start with the Pollard and Zeke. Then we'll get into the offensive line as a whole because I have a lot of great things to say about the O-line last night. Pollard, 13 carries for 105. His longest was 46. Zeke, 15 carries for 73 and a touchdown. His longest was 27. I got to say, man, this is ideal in terms of the workloading. Maybe lean a little bit Zeke, but I thought I complained about it a little bit against Cincinnati, but I thought the split between the workload of Zeke and Pollard was perfect last night. Because, and I said on Twitter earlier today, I was like, this is not an anti-Zeke thing. This is like more Pollard means you're going to get a better version of Zeke. I think Zeke's averaging 5 yards per carry this season. I mean, you're going to get a better version of Zeke. You're going to get a fresher, healthier Ezekiel Elliott, which is a good thing for the offense. And so, and I thought it was, I don't know if you noticed this, but on the last drive when Dallas got the ball back, they run the clock out, Pollard was the closer, which I don't know if we've seen that when Zeke's been healthy. So that's definitely something to monitor. And I really liked how they split up the usage of Pollard and Zeke. I thought they both played their roles well. Pollard kind of the more explosive guy, and he got loose on that 146-yard run. And Zeke, Zeke had some outside runs, but, a lot of it was between the tackles and being a power guy, finishing off runs, and they gave it to him at the goal line, which, by the way, was a really impressive run. He got in relatively easily, but he had to run through a couple guys. So I thought Pollard and Zeke were really good last night. And, I was a big fan of how they split up that workload.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in this situation, they're just gonna have to kind of deal with how the Cowboys are going to go about this. I mean, Pollard's going to get his share of touches, but Zeke is not going anywhere. And I think the sooner we realize that will be the sooner that, it's a more peaceful timeline during the Cowboys games. And you don't have to kind of, everybody doesn't have to beat down this conversation, because at the end of the day, the Cowboys love Zeke. And, I've come to that acceptance. I know I might be a little bit biased because, Zeke's one of my favorite players on the team. I just love what he's about. I love what he brings to the team. Contract aside, you can talk about that. That's a whole different other conversation. I get it. I definitely get that angle from it, but definitely a solid performance. And I loved that the 27-yard run came on a 3rd and 12 toss play, which is kind of a weird play call, but it definitely caught the Giants off guard and let Zeke get loose for, almost 30 yards, which, those are far and few between with Zeke these days. But definitely Tony Pollard. I mean, he's definitely that explosive guy. And I think one thing that they went to him on that last drive is, I think it was the Cowboys saying, no, we're not just trying to get 3 yards here, 3 or 4 yards and, run out the clock. We're trying to get a home run play if we can. And obviously Pollard's your home run threat. So I think that was definitely a big development from last night's game. And, the better this offensive line continues to get, the continuity they get, they worked Jason Peters in there last night. I think the better this run game will get. And then we'll start seeing more of those kind of explosive runs from not only Zeke, or not only Pollard, but we'll get, the 20 to 25 yards from Zeke as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the more this offensive line rounds into form, the better it's going to get. And I think, a strong running attack is going to help Cooper Rush even more, however many starts Cooper Rush has left this year. But going back to the O-line, congratulations are in order to Terence Steele, because he has quieted the haters since his week 1 performance with however many penalties he had. I believe he's only allowed 3 pressures through 3 weeks. He's been rock solid, man. We've said throughout a lot on this show that a very underrated storyline with this team is they kind of don't really have an alternative, or that, like, basically, what if Terence Steele isn't good? They're kind of screwed. Well, he's playing really well. He was their highest graded pass blocker last night. And he was, I believe, their highest graded offensive lineman behind Peters, who only played 6 snaps. Or no, I'm looking at that wrong. He played 14 snaps. But Terence Steele was rock solid last night. Continues to be rock solid. And he's, at right tackle, you're going up against the team's best pass rusher. They usually put their best pass rusher up against that guy, and he's handled those guys well. Tyler Smith was really solid again, and it looks like I complained about the pick, and it looks like I'm wrong about another Cowboys first-round pick, because he appears to be the left tackle of the future. On that Zeke 27-yard run you mentioned, he got out in space, and he flattened a couple DBs. I really enjoy watching Tyler Smith play. He's an absolute mauler, and that's one of my favorite types of NFL players to watch, is an O-lineman that's just an absolute mauler. He had a couple penalties, but he's going to have his growing pains. He's going to have his rough spots, but by and large, Tyler Smith has been really good at left tackle for them. And comparatively to a guy who was picked 19 picks higher than him, 17 picks higher than him, Evan Neal, who was getting abused last night. Tyler Smith looks really, really good. And it is, he's clearly come a long way technique-wise. But, yeah, Tyler Smith and Terence Steele have been two of the biggest, most pleasant surprises on the team so far through 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I think this only can improve Dak's chances once he gets back out there and can play behind this offensive line that we thought wasn't going to be very good. I can't even say we didn't think it was going to be very good. It just had a lot of question marks. But I think we're starting to get answers to some of those questions, which is definitely going to bode well for Dak when he gets back. Because I think Dak's at his best when has a lot of confidence in that offensive line, where he's comfortable standing in the pocket and being able to make some of those throws, get his footwork together, and not having to worry about someone down at his feet because the offensive line let somebody through. And like I just touched on it just a second ago, once Peters works in and gets more and more snaps, it's just going. I mean, you can only go up from here. We haven't heard Biadish's name. I'm not sure how the PFF grades came on Biadish, but we haven't heard his name a whole lot on the broadcast. So that tells me he's doing something right. And then also going back to Jason Peters just real quick, the explosive run that Tony Pollard had just happened to be Jason Peters' first snap. So I'm really excited about the prospects of what this offensive line can be once Jason Peters gets fully up to speed and can start playing more. That it's definitely something that, like I said, I think it's going to turn out to maybe be a strength for this Cowboys team. And then, like, if they can figure it out at receiver, getting Gallup back and different things of that nature, this offense could be, the offense that we're kind of accustomed to.
Yeah, the conversation about playing Peters at guard is something that I think we could maybe have, later this week on the next pod. But I was not thrilled about playing Jason Peters at left guard. I'll be honest, I wasn't, and I expressed that just because people underestimate how hard it is to move positions around the offensive line. It's really difficult, and asking a 40-year-old to do that is a lot, and that could frankly still blow up in their faces. But him and the prospects of him and Tyler Smith being the left side of your line, be it Peters at tackle and Smith at guard, or Smith at tackle and Peters at guard, it's exciting. It's really exciting, and like you mentioned, that big run came right behind Peters and Smith. I was really happy with the O-line last night. We haven't even mentioned his name as usual, but Zach Martin was again awesome last night. But yeah, I thought Biadasz did struggle a little bit last night. He had a couple rougher moments, and he was one of the lower. I believe he was the lowest graded lineman last night. So your comment did make me think of that, and I'm looking at the scores now, the grades now, and he gave up a pressure. Tyler Smith gave up a pressure. Farniok gave up a pressure. Martin gave up one, and then no pressures against Terence Steele. So they were really
total.
What's that?
4 pressures total.
I believe we're looking at 5 pressures total. I mean, maybe 4. Either way, not much at all. Cooper Rush was not sacked last night. It was the O-line was rock solid, and the O-line seems to be rounding into pretty good form because Terence Steele appears to be rock solid at right tackle. Zach Martin is Zach Martin. Biadasz has played pretty well so far this year. I don't think Biadasz is ever going to be anything special, but I mean, he's a fine starter, and he's doing his
just
job.
Don't beat you. I mean, don't
exactly. Just don't get us killed. And then it'll be interesting whenever Connor McGovern gets back, because Farniok, he is who he is. He struggled a lot. He was a lot better last night, but he's a third string guard. That's going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle it whenever McGovern gets back from his ankle sprain. It'll be McGovern and Peters maybe at left guard. But it seems like Tyler Smith is there to stay at left tackle. I think a better combination still would be Smith at guard and Peters at tackle. But, Smith is playing so well at tackle, you almost want to keep that development going, and he's your left tackle of the future. So I get it. But, kudos to the O-line. They were really good last night. They protected Cooper Rush. They sprung some really big runs, and they were really good. And I think I already mentioned it earlier, but I did want to mention it again if I already did. That Zeke run, I just about got up out of my seat watching Tyler Smith move. I did mention it briefly earlier, but watching Tyler Smith move in space is a lot of fun because he was clearing bodies out the way for Zeke. And I was wrong on Tyler Smith, it appears, and he's really fun to watch. He just moves bodies up front, and those type of maulers are really fun to watch. So I'm really happy with the play up front right now.
Yeah, I think it was a funny moment. I forgot who posted it, but during the little skirmish after the
Yes, yes.
game,
Talk about this. Yeah.
Peter, Tyler Smith was right by Jason Peters, and I don't know if I guess it was communicated in some fashion, but you
Peters had
see,
to said something.
yeah, you see Peters and Smith, strapping up the helmets and like, hey, we're ready for whatever, just in case anything goes down.
That
But I
was
think that was a real
definitely
cool
a
moment.
rookie vet moment for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I definitely enjoyed that, and I think Tyler Smith can only benefit from Jason Peters, and Peters can give Smith that insight at left tackle that he used all these years to become the All Pro, Pro Bowl, future Hall of Fame left tackle that Jason Peters was. And now Jason Peters gets to try out his talents at left guard, which I do think in the long run, I think it's going to end up being the right decision. Now, for the short term, we'll kind of see what happens. But I think leaving Tyler Smith at left tackle is the right move, and we can go deeper into that, like you said later this week. But on the surface, I definitely get it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that Peters moment was really funny because Peters puts on his helmet first, and Tyler Smith is kind of standing there. And Peters puts on his helmet, kind of walks next to Tyler Smith, and then Tyler Smith puts his helmet on. So I feel like Peters had to say, he's like, hey, strap up. like something's going down. And so I just love that. Your two big maulers on your O-line are strapping their helmets on after the game, getting ready to mix it up if need be. But yeah, that was a really funny rookie and vet moment because you can't convince me that Peters didn't walk up and tell him to put his helmet on because he put it on after Peters put it on and walked up next to him. So
Yeah.
that was a really funny moment. But yeah, do you have any other before we wrap this up? Do you have any other thoughts about the game last night, or you got anything else for us?
No, I mean, I just think obviously it was a real important win, like we touched on at the beginning. And I'm kind of looking forward to kind of seeing this defensive line against Washington coming up on Sunday, which should be a lot of fun because the Eagles had a ton of fun hitting Carson Wentz on Sunday. But other than that, from this game, just obviously happy that they came away with that dub, and now we can move on.
Yeah, absolutely. If you give me a second, I'm gonna pull up. We'll have plenty of time to talk about Washington, but I am curious how many pressures the Eagles registered because I think it was quite a bit. I believe they had 9 sacks.
Number. Yeah,
Let
they
me
had
look
9
at the
sacks.
defense here. Pulling up Philly's defensive grades. Philly registered 30 pressures against Washington on Sunday, so I'm sure Parsons and the fellas are licking their chops this week as Carson Wentz makes his return to Dallas. It should be fun, and we'll be talking about it in our preview pod later this week. But before we wrap this up, just want to let everyone know, make sure to follow our Cowboys account on Twitter at Cowboys News 365. Follow our main Twitter account at Dallas_Fanatic. Follow us on Instagram at DAL Cowboys Fanatic. Check me out if you're watching on Twitter. You're watching on YouTube. You can see my username at Nate_Sant77 and Corey's at the Mr. Douglas with 2 S's at the end. And check out everything going on as we're constantly putting out some written content on the website as well, DallasSportsFanatic.com, talking Cowboys and anything that implies. So, and again, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I believe we're at 290 subscribers right now. So it'd be awesome if we could get to 300. That would be a cool little milestone. So again, thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed your Victory Tuesday, and we will talk to you next time on the Silver and Blue podcast when we preview the Cowboys and the Commanders.